In 1981, Stephen King posed a chilling question. What if instantaneous travel came with the ultimate price? Your sanity? The Jaunt, first appearing in the Twilight Zone magazine before being collected in his anthology Skeleton Crew, begins as a deceptively simple science fiction tale about teleportation technology. But beneath its technological veneer lies one of King's most psychologically disturbing works, a meditation on consciousness, time, and the horrors of eternal solitude. The story unfolds through the lens of the Oates family as they prepare to use the Jaunt, a teleportation system that enables instant travel across space. Mark Oates, our protagonist, attempts to explain the technology's history to his children, Patty and Ricky, while they wait to be teleported from Earth to Mars. It's the year 2307, and the Jaunt has become as commonplace as air travel was in our time. But like all revolutionary technologies, it harbours a terrifying secret. We learn that in 1987, scientist Victor Carune discovered the Jaunt effect by accidentally teleporting mice across his lab. The mice arrived at their destination physically intact, but something was terribly wrong. They would emerge either dead or dying of shock, displaying signs of extreme aging, despite the journey taking only a millisecond. Eventually, Carune uncovered the horrifying truth that would define the technology forever. While the body travels instantly through space, an awake and conscious mind experiences the journey as an impossibly long period, perhaps eternity itself. Only by being unconscious during the process can a person jaunt safely, which is why all passengers must be given sleeping gas before transport. The horror of conscious jaunting is revealed through the government's classified experiments. The first human test subject, a convicted murderer named Rudy Van Dyke, emerged from the portal as something barely recognizable as human. King describes him as a shrieking creature with eyes rolling wildly in their sockets, fingers curved into claws, bleeding from self-inflicted wounds. The man had tried to tear his own face off, driven mad by the infinite emptiness he had experienced. His laughter, described as the laugh of a person who has been confronted with thousands of years of raving loneliness and darkness, echoed through the laboratory before he finally died. Other test subjects met similarly nightmarish fates. Some emerged having chewed their own fingers off. Others were catatonic, their minds completely shattered by the experience. One woman appeared with hair that had not just turned white, but had apparently lived through thousands of years of growth in that eternal instant, while her mind had deteriorated to nothing more than animalistic howls. Each subject confirmed the same terrible truth. In that void, they experienced an eternity of consciousness with nothing but their own thoughts for company. Mark carefully censors these gruesome details when explaining the Jaunt to his children, but 12-year-old Ricky, driven by that eternal curse of human curiosity, holds his breath when the gas is administered. What emerges on the other side is no longer really Ricky at all. King describes the horrifying transformation in vivid detail. The boy's hair has turned completely white, his face twisted into a Richter's grin, eyes bulging and rolling in their sockets as he claws at the air. In that split second of physical travel, Ricky had experienced an eternity. He manages only to scream, "It's longer than you think, Dad, longer than you think," before dying from the sheer psychological trauma, his mind utterly destroyed by the experience. The concept of subjective time becoming untethered from reality isn't merely fiction. In fact, there's a famous account that went viral on social media about a person who, after being knocked unconscious in a fight, experienced what felt like 10 years of life in just a few minutes of real time. In this vivid account, the person described meeting a woman, falling in love, getting married, and having 2 children. He remembered every detail of this other life, the smell of his wife's hair, the sound of his children's laughter, the texture of the walls in their home. He had a career, friends, daily routines, a complete and rich existence. But something began to feel wrong about a lamp in his living room. The more he looked at it, the more it seemed to warp and distort in impossible ways. This small detail, this glitch in his perceived reality, began to unravel everything. When he finally regained consciousness in the real world, mere minutes after being knocked out, he spent weeks in deep depression, mourning the loss of his wife and children, people who had never actually existed, yet whom he had loved for what felt like a decade of lived experience. But the jaunt is far worse. Unlike the lamp story, where the mind created an entire world to occupy itself, conscious jaunt travelers experience nothing but void. No sensory input, no dreamlike reality, no merciful hallucinations, just pure, unfiltered consciousness stretching out forever. Modern neuroscience has shown that our perception of time is intrinsically linked to the way we process sensory information and memories. In sensory deprivation experiments, subjects often report time distortions after just a few hours. The jaunt takes this concept to its ultimate horror, a mind forced to exist without any external input for what feels like eternity. This becomes even more terrifying when we consider the nature of consciousness itself. Our minds are constantly processing, sorting, and analyzing information. What happens when consciousness is forced to exist without any new input? Does it begin to feed on itself, creating ever more disturbing thought patterns as it exhausts every possible permutation of existing memories and ideas? The fact that no one has ever emerged sane from a conscious jaunt suggests something even more horrifying, that the mind, when trapped with nothing but itself for company, inevitably descends into madness. The jaunt shares DNA with other landmark works in science fiction. Alfred Bester's The Stars. My Destination actually introduced the term jaunting for teleportation, though with very different mechanics. The psychological horror of extended consciousness appears in Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, where characters are trapped in an eternal existence by a malevolent AI. More recently, Christopher Nolan's Interstellar explored similar themes of time dilation and the psychological impact of experiencing time differently than the rest of humanity. What makes the jaunt particularly disturbing is how it transforms a beneficial technology into an instrument of ultimate torture through the simple act of remaining conscious. It's a perfect metaphor for human curiosity and its potential consequences. Like Pandora's box or the forbidden fruit of Eden, it represents knowledge that comes at a terrible price. The technology itself is neutral. It's our consciousness that transforms it into a gateway to madness. Thanks for joining me on this journey through one of Stephen King's most psychologically disturbing concepts. If you enjoyed this exploration of the jaunt and its implications, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us create more in-depth analyses like this one. Coming up, we'll be exploring other unsettling concepts in science fiction, including the psychological horror of time loops and the philosophy of consciousness transfer in digital immortality? Let me know in the comments. How do you think your mind would cope with an eternity of pure consciousness? What would be worse? Experiencing nothing but void, like in the Jaunt, or living through countless false lives, like in the lamp story? I read all your comments and love discussing these mind-bending scenarios with you. See you in the next video.